And please fill front rows first before you fill the yeah yeah sabu sufu vakum. Please fill the front rows, please. Can we start now? Okay, good evening everyone and assalamualaikum for all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Uh, as you all know, we're having a very special guest tonight, Mr. Rami Ismail from Vlambeer, who come all the way from Dutch. Um, this meetup can be realized thanks to the help of Touchden as the host and Toge Productions as the organizer with Indonesia, and also with the supports of Duniaku and Agate. Tonight we're going to talk about how Rami Ismail will share his stories about how to be a better developer from his experience as an indie developer, a really successful indie developer, a celebrity in the game development, and you know the rest. Huh? So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Anton Suharyo as the CEO of Touchden Games to give his kind words, opening remarks.
Hi everyone, thank you. My name is Anton and I'm the host for today. We are from Touchden and we make games for smartphones in 2009. It's been 7 years for us, 7 fun years, making millions of people laugh and have fun around the world. And we are very proud to be made in Indonesia as well. So, like many of you, I just want to have a show of hands. How many of you are game developers? Wow, almost everyone. How many of you are not game developers? Why are you here? No, just joking. Just joking. Right. So yeah, we welcome everyone, and like Fami said, there's a special guest all the way coming here to visit us, and please use this time to talk to him, talk to us, and ask questions. And the bathroom is over there. That door, you go out on the right. It's a very traditional bathroom, Jongkok. The food are there, the drinks are there if you haven't, and just please enjoy your time here. Would like to say also thank you to Chris for bringing him here, for taking Asia, and Touchden guys for organizing this, and support by Agate and Dunyaku. If you have any questions about Touchden as well, or anything, just feel free to approach me. I'm very approachable. Unlike what the media picture me, I'm not a snobbish guy. But yeah, so I just want you to have fun, and let's hope that this talk can benefit us as a nation, yeah. As a game developer coming from Indonesia. Okay, thank you and enjoy your time.
Thank you so much for the nice words, Anton. So I don't want to make this longer than we should have. I would like to invite Chris Anthony from Toge Production, which you may know from Infectonator series and many other famous games. Chris will be moderating the whole session with Rami, and the session will last for around 30 minutes. And after that, you guys can have a question for Rami, and for the people on our live stream, you can also ask questions. Just put your question on the chat box, and hopefully we will answer it. So, please.
Thank you, Fahmi. Give applause to Fahmi. So let's just start this. I will invite Rami Ismail, 50% of Vlambeer and 100% halal, in front. Have a seat. So, yeah, I saw that on Twitter, by the way. So, Rami, you travel around the world like very often, and so what brings you to Jakarta?
Hi. Hi. So the honest truth is, and the Game Developers Conference and at PAX, I was both approached by developers from Jakarta who asked if I wanted to come visit, and it just so happened to be that I had a trip that would take me to from Moscow to Melbourne, and you were all right on the route. So I thought I might as well stop here. Because I'd heard really good stories about the community and about what was happening here, so I was really excited to check it out.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're very glad that you're here, and we're very excited to learn from you. So, when you're traveling, you have to manage your time with like business and game development, and also personal life. So, how do you manage that? Like,
Yeah. Okay, so I think a lot of it is a lot of it is just something that kind of happened. Like when when Vlambeer started originally, it's just me and my colleague, and I did programming, and my colleague did design. And he's really bad at business, so I just ended up doing the business. Like it was sort of an accident. Um, and so from the start of Vlambeer, I had to learn to manage both programming duties and business duties. And then as we grew, marketing got added to that. The way I keep track of what I'm doing, because I'm really bad at switching between the different mindsets. So what I do is I have days of the week that are specific for certain tasks, and then days of the month that are specific for certain tasks. So the 23rd of each month I do accountancy, and I do all legal work that we get on Sundays or Mondays. I do programming on Monday to Thursday, and then I do marketing planning on Friday. So my week is sort of set up in specific days.
so you set up a schedule and you stick. To
Yeah, I think a large part, because a lot of people think of game development as something that is purely about motivation.
Yeah.
Like feeling happy and it's really important to feel happy. Don't get me wrong, but I think more important than motivation is discipline.
Yeah.
Is the ability to sit down and do the work that you have to do, but also the ability to take a break, right? To like make sure that you are healthy. Because back when we started, I used to work way too much. Like I would work as much as I could, and I actually burned out in the second year of Vlambeer when Ridiculous Fishing got cloned. So yeah, taking care of myself was actually one of the most important skills I learned, was to take a break every now and then as well. But beyond that, a lot of it is discipline. Like I don't like doing the accountancy, but if I don't do it, nobody does it. So
That's very cool. So you have to have a schedule that you stick to it, and also make sure like you have time for yourself as well, so you don't get burned out.
yeah. Burnout is one of the most dangerous things in the industry that nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah.
But it's very real.
So what else? Like, how can you avoid like having burnout?
Well, I think part of it is, as a game creator, it's very easy to it's very easy to think that it's all about game development. And for me, very much it is, right? Like all of my life is, since I was 6 years old, all of my life has been about game development. But I found that since I've started to do other things outside of game development as well, in my case, travel, and working with local communities to, grow an industry, I found that my game development has become better, just because I have more influences and more inspiration and more things to build on. So I think finding a hobby that is not game development is a good way to avoid burnout.
Oh, nice.
More things to do technically, but it's different things to do. I like cooking.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, no,
That's
I
very
love cooking.
interesting.
Cooking is really fun. It's a lot like it, actually. When you think about it, it's like you have like certain things that you really need to not mess up,
Yeah.
and then if you have a bug in your recipe,
You don't eat it.
things don't work. So yeah, I like cooking.
Yes.
It's
So
fun.
talking about like inspiration, we see that in every game that you release, like Vlambeer's game, almost like it has a arcade feel to it. And is that something that you plan from the start, that our games is gonna be, have that arcadey feel, or is that just something that happens when developing each title?
So, okay, so first of all, I agree that most of our games are very arcadey. I think our fingerprint is less arcade and um, more our sensibilities. Like, so when Vlambeer started, when you think about it, JW is the designer, so our game ideas come from JW, and the games that JW used to make when he was like 13, 14 years old, he would make 300 games a year. Very small games, not big games, very small games. He would come home at like 3 o'clock from school, and then his friends would have said like, make a game about dogs before 6. Before 6 o'clock. So he would make a game for like 3 hours, and then have a dog game. And it was a really bad game, but he made the game. But what was interesting is it made him very good at immediate feeling. Like a game had to feel good, and he only had 3 hours. So he learned all these tricks to make games feel good and respond well. And a lot of Vlambeer's fingerprint is in that immediacy. Is like things immediately work. They're very clear. They're very minimalistic. They're elegant. There's nothing that doesn't need to be there. And that, I think that is more our fingerprint. And I don't think that was intentional. I think that is just who me and JW are. I don't think you have to plan for what you make. I think you have to figure out what you want to be. But more importantly, why you want to be that. So for Vlambeer, our main goal was we wanted to be a community studio. We wanted to be a studio that was built on the people that liked it. But we very much wanted the people that were our fans to like us. Not the games, but like us as creators. So every time we make a game, we make sure that it's a Vlambeer game, right? That it's not just a game, but also a statement. Oh, that was my mic. Cool. Yeah, that was me. I think I touched this. Sorry about that. Hi. I'm very sorry for the people on the stream. It hasn't happened on the stream yet. So in like 3 seconds, they're gonna hear a lot of things come out of their speakers. Nice. Yeah, I think it just happened. Anyway, so I think what was important for us was that we had a fingerprint of our own, and that fingerprint was just us, and not something we had come up with or planned. So we actually made a game called Yeti Hunter, which is a very slow, non-arcade, ambient game. We did a game called Glitch Hikers, which was a game that died. You can't play it anymore. We did a lot of like weird games that weren't necessarily arcadey, but I think they're all just very us, and I think that's very important. I think as a studio, the most important thing you can have is an identity, way more than a plan or a structure or a schedule. It's like, this is us. Yeah, signature, a finger. I like to think of it as a fingerprint, and that's our fingerprint. Well, I mean, I think signature is way less about sticking to it, because like as you grow, you change, and as you change, your audience changes as well. Again, I think a lot of fingerprint, a lot of identity is not necessarily intentional. It is what it is. But if you understand why you are who you are, if you understand why your fans are interested in what you make, if you ask yourself the question why a lot, to the point where it becomes annoying, like that often, you can learn a lot about why things are successful or why things fail, but they will only apply to you. Like the things that work for Vlambeer will only work for Vlambeer because we're us, and the community that we build is for us.
So now we're gonna move on to a more sensitive topic. You mentioned about cloning, and you also, it happens to you. You experience a very, emotional case when your game get cloned. But we also often hear people say that there's nothing new under the sun, and that games are, oftentimes they are either clones or variation or combination from other games. So the question is there where's the line between like inspired by and a clone.
Okay, so for the idea that there's nothing new under the sun, I don't believe that. I don't know if you look at the indie scene, um, it's super hot. Very recent game. There's never been a game like it, right? There's still new ideas. Um, Regardless, most games are in some way a combination of different things, and people often say, everything is a remix.
Yeah.
And I don't think people mean everything is two separate ideas that you mix together. I think what it means is the only way to be creative, like nobody has an original thought,
Yeah.
right? Because every thought we have is based on what we know, and everything we know is what we see in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that the more everything you have, the more things you do in life, the better your games will be. The more creative. If you go skydiving, you will be a better game developer, right? If you go parachute jumping, you will be a better game developer. And the line between clone and inspiration, that is a very gray area. But I like to think that every game design is built from questions and answers,
Yeah.
right? So your question can be, I want to make a fast-paced platformer. And then based on that question, you create an answer. And then based on that answer, you create new questions. So if you say, like, I want to make a very fast-paced platformer, you say, like, it needs to be very short levels. Then you're going to make certain level designs, and you're going to make a certain type of jump, and you're going to make... and I think that a clone is a game that doesn't look at the questions. So it just takes the answers.
Yeah.
It just looks at what the game is instead of why the game is. And it means that you can't prove whether something is a clone or original, because that's very gray. But if you're working on a game and you find yourself copying things from other games without wondering why they did it, you're not going to be making good or original games. You're going to be making clones. And I often find that very dangerous.
Yeah.
Me and JW, in fact, at Vlambeer, we have a rule that we can never use the name of another game in our discussions. Because one time we were making a small RPG, we never released it. It wasn't very good. But we were making this small RPG, and we said we needed an inventory system. And then I think I said, let's look at Diablo 2.
Yeah.
And Diablo 2 has this very unique inventory system where every object you find has a shape,
Yeah.
and you need to place it in this grid. So we copied that, but then like half a month later, we had like all sorts of other mechanics that we took from Diablo 2, just because we were talking about Diablo 2 and because the inventory system was built
Using
for
Diablo,
those mechanics. So to use that inventory system, we had to take so many other things from that game that we hadn't thought about, and eventually we were just making a worse version of Diablo 2. And we realized that if we had just asked ourselves the question, how do we make a grid-based inventory system with variable-sized items, that we could have made something specifically for our game that would work for our game without having to drag all this other stuff there to make it work. So we just made a rule, like, don't talk about other games ever. Try to explain it in pure words. So instead of the inventory from Diablo 2, a grid-based inventory system with variably sized items.
No, that's very interesting.
It helped us a lot.
Yeah. So, okay, now, Vlambeer is very successful now, and part of it is because your games are very fun, they're very polished, and it's very unique. And another part is the marketing or promotion or like PR side of it. So, how much do you would you say like the PR or marketing is, contributing to that success?
Well, I mean, without any marketing, we would have never sold a single copy of the game, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that if you make a good game, people will come is just, it's not true. Like the honest reality is, if you're making a good game, you owe it to the game to do good marketing. And good marketing is not something you do at the end of a project.
Yeah.
It's something that from the start of the project, you should be thinking about what is the unique thing about this game, what is special about this game. How can we communicate this game? And very often, I personally find that thinking about your marketing very well actually helps you create better games. Because if you're making a game about, like we made a game called Ridiculous Fishing, which was a game about fishing with machine guns, and trying to communicate what was interesting about that game actually helped us talk in the team about the things we were doing and why we were doing that. So I think like figuring out like a good pitch and thinking about like how does this game communicate in a screenshot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I used to do a thing where for every game we made, I would make a script,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would run that script while I was playing, and it would take a screenshot every second.
Mm-hmm.
So it would just take screenshots all the time. And then after like 30 minutes of playing, I would go into the folder with all the screenshots, and I would look at how good all of them look. And if the majority of them don't look good, then we need to make the game look better.
Yeah.
Because most people are going to be sharing their screenshots
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter, on Facebook. They're going to be using them in the press, and if not every screenshot looks good,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be bad for the game. So we fix we make sure our art communicates really well, and we make sure that any screenshot that we post is the best possible screenshot. And I think a lot of marketing is just learning to communicate about your game and learning to talk about your game. And I honestly believe that without the marketing we've been doing, that we just wouldn't have been visible. Like our first game, Super Crate Box, was a marketing game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we made that and then we released it for free,
Yeah.
so that as many people as possible would know about our name, that they would play our game, and we made zero money because it was free, but it was marketing. So I think making sure, like a lot of people think of marketing as convincing people
Yeah.
that they need to play your game, but it's not. It's finding the people that would already play your game if only they knew about it.
Mm.
So it's not actually that hard. All you need to do is like reach out. You need to talk to people. You need to learn to tell them that, hey, this is the game you are looking for. This is the game you want. More than like, you should play my game,
Yeah.
right? It's like, what you want exists.
Okay, so the other question is like in Indonesia, like most game media are focused on like Western markets or maybe Japanese. They are focusing on like Europe, America. So countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, or Thailand, like Southeast Asia countries, sometimes they don't get the media attention. Either maybe because. So the question is, how can we grab their attention and hey, look at Indonesia or look at these countries that are making games.
Well, I think part of it is being a little like I use the word aggressive in
Yeah.
a very like non-aggressive way, but like just keep emailing, like
Uh-huh.
let them know that the industry exists here, and then if everybody does that, at some point they'll get annoyed and actually start
Check it
writing
out.
about you.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like to use the advantage of people in the West very often not expecting a healthy game development community like this one in a place like Indonesia, because they've just never been here. But that actually makes it so that a lot of Western press would happily write about the community here. So if you reach out to a major newspaper or a gaming site, don't forget to mention that you're an Indonesian game studio, because it will make a lot of people go, oh, okay, that's interesting. So you can actually leverage that both ways. And I think a lot of people are sort of embarrassed to say like we're Dutch,
Yeah.
and like we were very embarrassed to say that we were Dutch when we started. So we actually like forced ourselves to say it. So our tagline is still a Dutch independent game studio, because we were afraid to say Dutch, and we wanted to be proud of,
Yeah.
of what we are. So don't forget to say you're an Indonesian
Yeah.
game studio when you're
And
reaching
proud
out.
of it.
And be proud of it. Yeah, no, I mean the fact that there is a games industry in a country means that a lot of people did a lot of hard work and like gave up other jobs
Yeah.
that allowed them to be this industry. So yeah, no, be proud of what your industry is.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these things just take time
Yeah.
and like perseverance. You have to keep pushing. And a lot of it is like creating games. Like
Yeah.
the first time it will not work, and then you look at what went wrong, then you try it again. Then you keep going until eventually it breaks.
Yeah.
The other thing is try seeing if some newspapers in the Netherlands, we did that, if some newspapers have people that work for the technology department instead of the games department,
Yeah.
and ask if they would be interested in doing an ongoing series about like local made games instead of like doing the press
Yeah.
thing, do like a column thing. And that works sometimes as well.
Very interesting. So we often see you also talk about exhibitions, like how important it is for indie developers to exhibit in events like PAX, or like you submit your games to Indie Mega Booth. So why is that? Why is it important?
So So I think there's two reasons for exhibitions there's two reasons why they're important. Okay, so reason number one is it's marketing.
Yeah.
Right? So these are events where enthusiasts go to, people that love games so much that their friends think of them as experts.
Yeah.
So if they say a game is good,
Mhm.
it's good to a lot of people all of a sudden. And a lot of like larger conventions take 70 to 130,000 people, visitors. They're huge. A lot of people go there, and if you can convince them that your game is good, they will convince other people that your game is good. And then on top of that, the press is there, and obviously the press is an ability for you to reach out to reach more people. Twitch streamers, YouTube creators, they're all at those events. So just being there, being able to show your game, but also being able to talk to people, to reach out to people, to introduce yourself to people, to be part of the global games industry as well as the Indonesian games industry. That is a very important thing to do. The other thing that I really like about exhibitions is that people will play your game, and they will be really bad at it, and you will get a lot of feedback from people who don't like it, and you'll be able to sit down. Like my favorite thing at exhibitions is I grab a little notepad and I just pretend I'm not the developer, right? I just take a few steps back and I just look at somebody playing the game, and then I listen to what they're saying. They say like, oh, the controls are not good, and I just make a note, you know, and they say like, oh, this is not fun, this enemy is too hard. Like they'll just be talking to their friends, and I just listen, and then I have this amazing bench of feedback at the end of the week. For one game, we even saved statistics on how people were playing to balance the game, just pure numbers, just all these people playing, and we could just see their faces and playtest. And it's one of the best playtests you can get is not other game developers, because we're all game developers, right? It's players. It's people that would play our game. So exhibitions are an amazing way to get to them, and then try your game before you release it. So you can fix your problems before people have paid for your game, at which point it's usually too late.
Cool. Yeah. So that's the list of questions that I have right now. So I'm gonna open this question and answer session to the audience, and let's see if they have questions for Rami, and if they want to know something that we haven't discussed. So, okay, guys, do you have any questions? Please raise your hands. Okay, we got one back there.
Hello Rami, my name is Riris. I'm from Game Changer. Hi. Thank you for coming to
course.
Indonesia. But actually, I'm really curious about the reason you come here to Indonesia. Maybe you can share the reason. Maybe maybe the reason is you want to collaborate with one of studio game here in Indonesia. I don't know, because you travel a lot, like Chris said before. And then, how do you see Indonesia as a country? Maybe from the market, from the target market, the player, I mean, and also from the developer. Maybe you can also share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, before I got invited to Indonesia, I have to admit I didn't know very much about the game development community here. After I got invited, I've read up a bit and I've looked at the games that have been made here. And seeing this is very impressive. This is something that a lot of countries would be very jealous of, to have like an office where you can have a meetup like this, and so many people come out, even though this was announced like 4 days ago. Sorry about that. That was totally on me. Next time I'll let you all know a little bit earlier if I come to Indonesia. I didn't know I was coming until 4 days ago. So yeah, it's very impressive that this happens, and like this space is obviously impressive, and I understand that there are more studios doing work like this. I understand that that there's an ongoing conversation with the government to work on the games industry and improve things for the games industry. And I have to be honest, like in the Netherlands, we used to have really good connections with the industry, with the government. But in the last few years, they've been getting worse and worse because our government has been becoming more right-wing. So they've cut a lot of cultural support, and they now moved it to economic support. And it turns out that the Ministry of Economy is not very interested in us as an industry. So now we have to figure things out. But this feels like a growth community. It feels like a community that is very rapidly growing, and it's probably very rapidly attracting new people and attracting new companies. And I think the challenge is for the independent creators that are here right now to make games that are both very true to the culture here, but also very global, and then through that inspire new people to join, and then some of them will grow and some of them will not. And I think as long as you can create new examples of Indonesian game developers, as long as you can create new successes, the industry will keep growing and be a very healthy industry. So I'm very impressed by everything I've seen so far. So I'd heard that there was a games industry, but just the actual size of the industry and the numbers I was not aware of. I have to be honest that for most countries, if I'm not going to a country, it's very hard to know what is happening in that country, because there's a lot of countries on the world, it turns out. I've been to a lot of countries, and there's still more left than I've visited, so that's...
Okay, and from your answer, maybe you will have a second visit, and maybe you will continue.
I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to come back and have more than like 18
Thank you.
hours in Indonesia.
So I'm gonna write that down and make sure next year you come back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no promise.
Yeah.
Deal. And I'll stay for more than 18 hours.
Okay, so who's next? Any other questions? Please don't be shy. Yeah. Yang di dulu depan tadi.
Sure. Yes, sure. I come from this short answer. Let's go.
My name is Bintang. Currently, I'm just a gamer. What I want to know is how do indies or maybe any company that make games decide what's the price of the game?
The price.
Yeah, how do they
Okay.
decide?
So that's a really hard question. Pricing a game is effectively nonsense. When you think about it, it's a very weird thing. We have this digital thing that has no value in the real world, and then we're gonna be like, this is $12, right? And we kind of just make it up. But the way you make that up is you look at games like your game, and you kind of see what price they are, and then you decide whether you want to play with that or you want to do something else. And sometimes it can be good to be more expensive because it makes your game look like it's a higher quality. Sometimes it can be better to go cheaper because you might sell more copies. Sometimes it's better to go free because, you know, like Super Crate Box, which was free, a lot of people played that. So there's no golden rule for pricing. In general, it seems that the things you want to consider most is the value your audience thinks the game will have. So I like to think of it in like terms of there's like a 3D bonus, right? So if a game is like $7.99 and it's 2D, if it were 3D, it could be $12.99 because gamers think 3D games are more impressive. And if a game has online multiplayer, you can charge a few dollars more because it has online multiplayer. But how much budget you spend is not relevant in pricing, and how much time you spend on the game is not relevant in pricing. If you're expecting your game to earn back to have a certain price because you spend X amount of money, the audience doesn't care. They don't know those numbers. So it's sort of like you just try something. Like what we very often do is we'll start with like 15, and then we ask ourselves, is that too high? And we go like, that's too high. Okay, how about 10? It's like, that's too low. 11, too low. 12 sounds good. How about 13? Like 13 is too high. 12, and then we just sit at 12. But like every time, it's just you just say it, and then you listen to whether it sounds good. And if it doesn't sound good, then you don't do that price. There's a really fun story about Autodesk. They make 3ds Max, and I think when that came out, it was like $60. It was really cheap, and now it's like $1,500. But the reason they did that is because nobody was buying it. Everybody was like, I'm not gonna pay, like, I'm not gonna get a really cheap 3D program. I have to run like a big international company on like good solid 3D programs. And they thought $60, that can't be a good it can't be good. So then somebody said like, you should make it like $1,000. They made it $1,000, and it was suddenly a hit, right? So it's very little about what the actual value, because like the things we make are digital. They don't have the normal value system that other products have. You know, like you have a car, it's made out of metal, it's made out of machines, it's made out of leather, it's made out of all sorts of, and you can just add up all those values and then you have a price.
So
But-
are you saying like if your game doesn't sell at $60, you should make it $1,000?
I mean, if it's a game that is for corporate purposes, maybe actually. But yeah, that's the thing. Like when you think about it, if you make a game that's $1,000 and you can sell it once, you've beaten a developer that makes a game that's $1 and they don't sell it 1,000 times, right? So pricing means nothing. Like the honest truth is, you have to pick a number that you're comfortable with and then figure out, will this price get me what I want? So the bigger question is, what do you want? Do you want a lot of people playing your game? Make it a lower price. Is it better to have a few people that really care about the game? Make it a higher price. We did early access for Nuclear Throne, and we actually, normally what you do is you put the game in early access for like a certain amount of money, but it's lower than the final game, right? So you get more people playing it. But for Nuclear Throne we did the opposite. Nuclear Throne in early access was actually $1 more than after. And we very clearly said, if you wait until it's done, it's going to be cheaper. And a lot of people asked us, why would you do that? We said, we don't want everybody's feedback. We want feedback from the people who really care, the people who care enough to pay more to be able to play it now. So the question is, what do you want? And then based on that, you set a price. And then very often, you just kind of make something up and then go with that. $5, done, like, right? Yeah, and just look at the other stuff around you. So on mobile, on iOS, you can probably not get away with $30 for a game unless it's really, really pretty. But on Steam, you could totally do that. On PlayStation, it might work. Like, it's very hard to say. It's, for us, it's a lot of talking to ourselves, which we're really good at. So.
Yeah. Next question. The one in the back.
Hello Rami. I'm Andre from
Hi.
Goda Games. I really like your game Nuclear Throne.
Thank you.
I wanna ask a question. Do you have any advice for indie game developer when they search for a publisher, or when they approach by a publisher? Or do you think we are indie, we don't need publisher, publisher needs us more? What do you think about that?
Okay, so publisher are an interesting one because I think it works both ways, right? Like technically, a publisher will always need the developer more than the developer needs the publisher. That's the way it is, because their business is literally finding developers that they can help. Like the developer is the one that engages the publisher to do work for them, right? But the other way around, a publisher is a very healthy part of the gaming ecosystem, of the game development ecosystem, especially if they help out with funding. So depending on what you are doing, an independent developer can use a publisher. In fact, Vlambeer has used a publisher two times. Devolver Digital. We used Devolver Digital and we used Adult Swim, which is Cartoon Network. And we've worked with them twice for 2 of our games. It was actually a very positive experience. They funded part of our games. They help with marketing, they help with release, they help with publishing. And that can be very helpful. For Luftrausers, we used Devolver Digital, and they took care of all of our PlayStation paperwork, which we didn't know how much paperwork there was, and there is a lot of paperwork in working with PlayStation. And then for Nuclear Throne, we actually decided to not use a publisher because we wanted to try doing that ourselves and like learn how to do it so that we could self-publish again in the future. So it kind of depends on your project, whether a publisher is the right idea or not. If you're working in a market you don't understand, or you are worried that you will have to spend a lot of your time on things that you don't want to be working on, then a publisher can absolutely be the right answer. I don't think indie means no publisher. I think it's a certain spirit, right? It's a certain attitude towards game development where you don't want to make compromises. But if you can find a publisher that allows you to not make those compromises, then it's, you know, then they're effectively an indie publisher, which I never thought that could exist, but apparently. Now, the other thing I think is when you're searching for a publisher or you get reached out to by a publisher, you want to ask yourself, what is the value they offer for the value they ask? So if they say, we're going to do marketing for you, that actually means nothing. It means technically they could send one tweet with the name of your game and say, hey, we did marketing, right? So unless they're very specific in what they're going to offer you, you should always walk away from a deal. If they can tell you exactly what they're going to do, that's good. And then the other thing you want to be looking for is evidence of their promises. If they say we can launch your game on Steam for you, you should check whether that publisher has games on Steam. If they don't have a number of games on Steam, then you should ask for proof, right? Because effectively what they are offering is they will do certain things for you in exchange for a percentage of your revenue. But for some publishers, they just like adding games to their portfolio, and they're not going to earn money with your game. They don't expect to earn money with your game. They're not going to invest in your game. So for us, the way we work with publishers is very strongly we want them to pay an upfront fee. So before we start, we want an amount of money from them. Usually 10 to like $100,000, somewhere between those numbers. And then we ask for what their recoup is, so the rate at which they will take their money back. And usually they say about 70%. So for every dollar we earn selling the game, they take 70 cents until they've earned back everything they've spent on the game. And then after that we flip. So it goes 30 for them and 70 for us. And we find that very fair. But the reason we ask for money up front is so that they have spent money, and if they have spent money, they'll be more interested in, making sure they earn back their money. So for us, that's been a very healthy way of working with publishers. The final thing is, think about what it will do for your studio reputation, right? So will this publisher help me get the reputation I want? If you're making very strong arcade action games, Devolver Digital, which we mentioned before, is a publisher that very strongly focuses on that. Well, if you're going to make like a cute mobile game, you might want to look at Chalingo instead and not Devolver Digital. So figure out what their brands are and how that fits into your game. And then the honest truth is you just email all of them. You just reach out and then you ask all of them for a deal. You just say like, here's the game, let's talk. And then you get, out of the 100 publishers that you reach out to, like four of them might email back. Then you just offer all four a deal, and then you see who gives you the most, and then you take them. And sometimes it's the right thing to just take none of them. Sometimes you have a game that is not affected by marketing or publishing, and then you just walk away. You just don't do a publisher.
Okay, thank you. How about this? You're approached by a big publisher.
Yeah.
But they will funded you, but they want to make a big change in your game design.
Right.
How about that?
So here's the question: how much money are they offering enough money for you to spend a certain amount of your life working on something you don't like? If the answer is more than enough to make a next game, then go for it. Like we've done games that we did not like for amounts of money that allowed us to make a game we love. And if this is not the game that you are the most passionate about making exactly what it was, then make the change, earn the money, and then make the game you want to make, right? Part of game development is making sure that you can survive. It's making sure that you have money. And if working a few months, working a year on a project you don't like, make sure that you can work for 3 years on a project you love, you have to ask yourself, is that worth it? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes the game is really important to you, and you should not take the deal. But if it's a change that is not critical, if it's a change that is to a game that is not the most important thing, then it might be worth taking the money. Because, in the end, we're also trying to, the odd thing about game development is that we are mixing art and commerce. We're mixing art and business, and it's hard to figure out where in the balance that falls, but sometimes it's the right thing to take that deal, just because it will allow you to make the game you love.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with that. Also, by the way, as a side point, if that game, right, if they are a very big publisher, it might also be worth considering what it will do, again, for your studio reputation. Having a game released by a major publisher actually sounds really good to other publishers. So maybe if you have a future game, you can say, oh, we have a game that we launched with this large publisher, and then other people might take you more serious just for that. So it might also be worth investing 6 months of your life in the legitimacy of having worked with this large publisher, even if you don't like them. No, that doesn't matter. Like, nobody has to know that you hated your life for 6 months making this. Yeah, right. Nobody has to know that. All you have to say is like, we worked with these people, and we made a game.
Okay. I hope that answered your question. So next, I see some hands in the back. Yeah, that guy.
That's a good question.
Yeah, very good.
Hi, Rami. I'm really sorry.
Those microphones are loud, right?
Oh,
It's really like they often give
I
you
don't
the
really
rule.
expect that.
If they
Something
give
like
you the rule to put 2 fingers between your mouth and the microphone, but if you do that with these, it's still way too loud. You put like an arm between. Like
Yeah, I'm really sorry. So
now
yeah,
it's good.
yeah. Hi, I'm
Hi.
Andrew. I'm from Turkey Productions. and
Hi.
I was also the one who met you in the Mega Booth.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you remember. So yeah. So I remember that I have read one of your tweets on your Twitter about, like you said that we don't have to worry about having like very messy spaghetti codes when you program your game. Is that really true? If you recall
So
that?
when we make games, we worry about code. When we make prototypes, we don't care.
Okay.
When we're prototyping, we don't care. Actually, this was one of the hardest skills that I had to learn because I'm a programmer. I care about good code. I care about code structure. I care about, the code looking nice. And if you look at my colleague's code, and he's the prototyper, it makes me cry. Like,
Yeah.
he does not use tab. All the code is entirely against the left. Game Maker does not require semicolons, so he just uses enter. He doesn't nest things. He doesn't, like, his variables are named like A, B, C, D. And like that's how he makes games. But he makes them in 2 hours. And then we can look at it and be like, this is good. And then if it's good, I program it properly while crying. But if you're prototyping, you just make. You just don't care. But if you make the full game, then you should probably make sure that your variables are not called A,
Okay.
B, or C.
Or blah.
Or blah, or boom, which was my favorite. That was how many explosions were on the screen. It was just boom.
Boom and then a capital boom.
Yeah, just boom. Yeah. He also had a variable called drip, which was if you went underwater and then came out of the water again, your airplane would drip. And he was like, this is a good name. And I'm like, no, this is a very bad name. I have no idea what drip is until I checked what the code did. Yeah, that was a disaster. Anyway, yeah, so code is an interesting one. Like, I think making sure your code is well structured when you start a project is very important, and keeping a certain level of code quality up during a project is very important. But the honest truth is, by the time your game launched, it's probably all terrible anyway. Because by the end of a project, like the project has to be done, and you don't have time to make it perfect. They say the biggest enemy of releasing a game is perfectionism, and I think that's true. So have good code, not perfect code, and if you can do that, you'll be fine.
Thank you.
No, but JW's code actually makes people cry.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Wow.
We did a mobile version of Super Crate Box, and we had a Canadian studio do it, and they asked me for the source, and I was like, you don't want the source. They're like, so how do we figure out what everything is? I'm like, you use a measuring tape on the screen, because that'll be easier than the code. And they were like, no, can you send us the code? And I sent them the code in an email, right? I attached it to an email, and the next day I got an email back, and they had attached the source again, and they said, have it back. This is they made a joke out of it. But apparently the programmer on that team actually cried at the code. He was like, this is useless. This is the worst code I've ever seen. So, yeah. You can make good games with bad code. You can't it's easier to make a bad game with good code, I guess, than the other way around. Did I say that right? I'm not even sure if I said that right. You know what? Never mind.
Just make your game.
Yeah, make stuff.
Other questions? Okay.
Hello, Rami. My name is Fajar from Choco Arts Games. Do you have any tips for self-publishing? I mean, when do we start? Is there any specific forum for good marketing?
So there's not really. The problem with marketing, I think, is that it's very specific to your game, right? So if you want to self-publish, the basic thing you need to do is figure out all the steps that lead to a game release. And your biggest challenge is figuring out what you don't know you don't know. So there's like, you know, for most things in life, you know, if you start playing a guitar, you know that you don't know how to play notes, and you know that you don't know how to strum, and you know that you don't know all these things. But with game development, the biggest challenge is there's a lot of things you just don't know about at all. You don't even know that you don't know them. You've just never heard of them. And that's actually the biggest challenge you run into as a self-publishing studio. And very often you learn by trying and then figuring out like, oh, we need to do this. Like I did not know that you have to write every description for your game in a studio. Like you know, when we put our game on Steam, we were like, and they're gonna write a description, and the Steam was like, nope, you're gonna write that. And I'm like, am I? And they're like, and then I lost like a day of my life trying to write a description. But like self-publishing is like figuring out everything related to your game. So you have to do your marketing, you have to do your finance, you have to do your legal, you have to sign your contracts, you have to get your dev kits, you have to do everything. You have to make your website. Like nobody ever thinks about that, but like you have to make your own website or hire somebody to make your website. You have to keep track of your bugs. You have to like everything needs to be internal. So basically, the biggest tip I can give you for self-publishing is do self-publishing, and then every month or 2 months sit down and look at what you've done and then see what could have been better. And if you do that and keep doing that and take everything seriously, you will find that within a few months you have somebody specifically doing that and that alone. And that person will be your producer for the rest of your company existence, I guess. But yeah, no, you basically need a person that does all that, and that's for most game developers, that is not the job they want. It was not the job I wanted. It was just the job I ended up with, because if I let JW do the marketing, we would have been out of business within like 3 weeks. So it was something that happened, and I ended up being like reasonably good at it, so that worked out. But I think for self-publishing, the truth is there is no forum for it, because there is no one solution. If you're a small studio, the solutions are so different from if you're a big studio. If you have funding, it's so different from not having funding, that you just have to figure out what you're doing. The main tips I can give you is make sure you have an accountant and make sure you have a lawyer. And if you have those two, you're pretty good, because you should not do your own contracts without a lawyer, and you should not leave your financials up to chance. So those are the two things that no game developer is good at. So, and scheduling. We're all bad at scheduling. Why are we so bad at scheduling? You would think that we're all like technical smart people, and then we go like, this will take 2 weeks, and then 6 months later you're like, these are really long 2 weeks. Like, how did that happen?
We're gonna release our game at this date.
Yeah, right. And then that date is the day like Grand Theft Auto comes out, and you're like, we could have seen this coming. Don't launch your game in the same week as Grand Theft Auto. That is my self-publishing advice. Or Fallout 4.
Oh, by the way, like timing-wise, like is there a specific month that you have to avoid self-publishing?
Yeah, basically don't publish anything after October.
October.
After October, the year is done. For independent developers, you hit like 10 October, it's over. Because from that point on, it's end years. And end of years, all the big AAA games come out. So it's like, unless you want to launch against Halo 6, probably don't do that. If you do want to launch against Halo 6, it's totally the right time of the year to do it after October. And then January tends to be pretty busy, and then February is usually pretty calm, and then March, and then it starts building up again until summer holidays. For bigger games, you want to avoid those months. For mobile, it's actually very different. For mobile, it's just find a week without a major release, and then avoid the weeks that everybody wants. So the end of year, again, is a really bad place to launch, because all the big companies, especially in the last few weeks, Apple locks the featured games, so they stay featured for 2 weeks. So everybody wants that week. And you're not gonna win that from Supercell, who's just gonna like throw 70,000 million at it, and then be like, "Well, we didn't get it. Too bad of the $70 million." But like you want to pick your battles. So keeping track of the news is a really good way of figuring out when to launch your game. Whenever the news is talking about indie games, that was a good time to launch a game because it means they weren't talking about bigger games. So.
Is there a when a specific month for indie games to launch? Is there something like that?
We like March.
March?
We really like March. March is good. And like we also sometimes don't take our own advice. Like when you think about it, Nuclear Throne launched in December. But the reason we launched in December is because Sony gave us the opportunity to launch at the PlayStation Experience Expo, which was this giant event where they were going to put us on a stage. And we were like, okay, well, I guess we're launching in December now. But a large part of it is thinking, how can I maximize the attention for my game? And large part of that is just making sure that there's no bigger games launching at that point.
Awesome. Yeah. That guy first.
Hello, my name is Adit. I'm from Bandung. It's 4-hour drive from
Wow.
yeah, from
Thank
here.
you for coming.
Yeah, but it's worth it.
Thank you.
Very much. I read your article about the 6 stages of game development community, and I want to know which country that you visit that you think has the most impressive growth in I think like the past year or so, because I want to know what things that we can do here in Indonesia that can help the community grow.
So this comes with a disclaimer. I am Egyptian, half Egyptian. I think Egypt had a very impressive growth recently, and similarly South Africa grew really rapidly. And I think for South Africa, the main thing was an event called Amaze that decided to start a show in Johannesburg, and it created an event, a larger show that all developers could come to. And it's partially a developers event, but it's also partially a consumer event. And it seems that consumer events actually help very strongly with creating a central focal point for the year, right? So normally when people make games, they just kind of spread throughout the year because they don't have a set date to shoot for. And in independent games, very often the date that people shoot for is the submission date of the Independent Games Festival Award, because that tends to be like October-ish. So if you have your game done end of September and launch in September and then submit your game to the IGF, the judges will have just played your game, and then when they have to judge it, they go like, "Oh, I've heard of this," right? So everybody tries to hit September, but we found from like recent years that any country that does a consumer grade show seems to have pretty like positive growth. Similarly, Uruguay had a very rapid growth recently after they released Kingdom Rush, which was a Uruguayan game. And that was a hit of such a scale that it allowed them to start spending money on the local community. So it's countries that have major hits or countries that manage to land a show that is international or consumer focused seem to go through growth spurts. But again, everything is sort of dependent on the country it is in. So looking at other countries can be really useful, but it's also very useful to remember that that worked in that country, and it won't necessarily work here. It might, but I think the lesson to take away from most countries is that they did the effort to make something happen. So if there's something that you feel should exist in Indonesia that would help grow the industry, then you should set up a team and make it happen. That's how all great things in the games industry, like Indie Mega Booth, started with 3 developers sitting around the table going, "There's no way we're getting attention at a major show, we should work together." And then they started working together, and now it's this amazing thing where hundreds of developers are working together towards one major goal. So I think the largest thing you can learn is to work together and set up goals that are larger than one studio. To always aim for how can we make our studio more successful, but also create structural improvement in the country, in Indonesia, in the community, in the region, sometimes more than just Indonesia, for like the entire region. If you could start a show here that is the biggest of the region, then that is good for the entire region. But you have to sit down and give it a go, give it a shot.
Okay, please.
Thanks for coming. My name is Adi. I'm planning to open my own small studio in the sometime in the near future, and I was just hoping that not hoping. I just wanted to know, like, what should I worry the most, and what should I expect in my first few years of opening my studio. Thanks.
So the thing you want to worry about the most is you need to have an identity. So your studio needs to stand for something. It doesn't really matter what that is, as long as there's something that is very you, very that studio. That should be your focus number one, because it's what people are going to attach to, is what you are. And the best way to do that is, again, I mentioned it before, is to ask yourself why. Like, it's a very fun question when you think about it. Like, when you say, like, why do you make games? Like, for me, it's the first answer is like, because it's fun. But then that's not a right answer, right? It's the easy answer. So why is it fun? It's like, well, because I think games are an important medium that can do things that no other medium can. I was like, why can games do that? And then if you keep asking yourself questions like that, eventually you find like truth, right? Like this tiny nugget of, this is why I make games. Like, this is really find that for yourself, and then build your studio around that, so that your studio is you. Then the second thing you want to do is figure out how to communicate that. So your logo should fit that, your website should fit that, your games should fit that. And if you can communicate that, it will make for a stronger studio. And then I think the final thing you want to worry about is to actually not worry too much. Like, get going, just make that first game. For your first few years, all you want to do, honestly, is survive. That's the only thing that's important, because your first game is probably not going to be a hit, and your second game is probably not going to be. We were at 4 games before we had like a hit, and I've been making games since I was 6. I can tell you, I had like hundreds of games that went nowhere. Then again, I was 6, so I was really bad at making games. But I was really bad at making games until I was 21, so that's 15 years of really. Anyway. No, so all you want to worry about is surviving and staying afloat. And then while you're doing that, every game you make, if you can break even and keep going, you're at a good point. And then at some point you want to start thinking about profit, and you want to start thinking about the people that you've gathered around along the road, the people that became your fans. You know, you want to grow that every game. If every game is more fans, you're doing well. But keep in mind that for the first few years, you're probably not going to make a lot of money, and your goal should be to survive. And then your major first goal should be to pay everybody that works for you a salary. And if you can hit that goal, you've made it. You are a sustainable game studio. And there's nothing better than that goal. Because making a good game, that's great. But if you still can't pay the people, it wasn't worth it, right? It was just a great game. So your first goal as a studio should be pay everybody a wage. And if it's just you, then that is pay yourself a wage, right? So make that your goal. Not like do it now, but like in the next few years, I want to get to the point that I can pay myself a wage. What can I do to get there?
Okay, so this is going to be the last question.
Sorry? The last question will be taken from the live stream.
Okay.
So we have question from Frida Dwi. He asks about Game Garden. Does Vlambeer still works at Game Garden? And how much does Game Garden give impact to the game dev community in Dutch? And what have improved since Game Garden? And for starter, maybe you can explain what is Game Garden, yeah.
Okay, so the Dutch Game Garden is a incubator, accelerator, and business center in the Netherlands. So what that means is it is a co-working space. So a space like this, where different game studios work and then work together to have more power in negotiating with the government, but also with publishers. It's just, it's technically a very chill environment where developers can just, I can ask the developer next to us, like, do you know somebody at Apple? And they can come to us and be like, do you know somebody at Steam? So you pool knowledge, right? You put knowledge together. And then the other people that are there, the people that run the Dutch Game Garden, tend to have negotiated good contacts with the press and with and have a network, an existing network in the games industry. So Dutch Game Garden is in the Netherlands is a very important focal point for independent studios. Most independent studios that grow in the Netherlands, including Vlambeer, have at some point been part of Game Garden, of the Dutch Game Garden, and through that had time to do that thing I just said, to just survive, right? Because you would have an office space that is not expensive. You would have people around you that could give you expert advice, and having a space for that was extremely valuable for us. Like a space where we felt we could work together with other people. It gave a sense of community and it gave a sense of togetherness that was very critical for Vlambeer to exist, but it also helped us identify problems in the Netherlands. So this didn't exist in the Netherlands when we started. We didn't have indie meetups. So we started organizing meetups. We just like the other answer, we saw that there were no meetups, so we made a meetup, right? But Dutch Game Garden helped us identify that issue. So I think anything that pools resources together as independent developers is good. Like, the idea that we would be competing with each other is ridiculous. Like, we are not competing with each other. We are working together. And Indie Mega Booth, I think, proves that so strongly, that indies are stronger if they work together. If we don't see each other as competition, but collaboration, if we see each other not as economic rivals, but as cultural supporters. Like, we are trying to make games better. We're trying to make games that are interesting, that are personal, that are culturally relevant, and then hopefully we can earn some money doing it, right? Like, that's the whole sort of balance. But if we see each other that way, then we can achieve far more than we can apart. And I think in the Netherlands, the Dutch Game Garden was the focus point of that. And I think a lot of game developers in the Netherlands are working to keep that alive, because funding has gotten harder in the last few years thanks to our government switching. So, the government support here is very relevant, and that I think that sort of stuff is something you should cherish. And if you have a lot of independent developers here, make sure that you're communicating about how you can work together. If you have contacts in the press, if you have contacts at major platforms, share them openly. Don't keep them to yourself, and grow together.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess that's the question and answer session, and I think there are a lot more questions in the
Seems to be true.
Yeah, the online. So maybe you'll answer that later. So I think I'm gonna say thank you for coming here, and it's been great having you here.
Thank you for having me. This has been very impressive.
Yeah, we'll see you again next year probably.
We will see. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make a deal out of that. Hopefully, if everything goes all right, I'll be back next year.
Awesome.
Good.
So thank you, Rami. On behalf of the Indonesian game community, we thank you for coming, and I'm gonna give back the floor to Fahmi. Thank you.
Yo, thank you. Thank you so much to Chris for moderating, and Rami for the really good insights. So if you still want to ask things to Rami, hopefully he's still available.
I'll be around.
Just approach him, say, hello, I make games, or I want to make games. Be brave. He might be big, but he's a really nice person. And if you want to talk to other pros, I think we have Chris, and then Joe, and Fox at Touchstand. If you want to learn a lot from them, go ahead, meet up, network, and thank you for coming.
Hi guys. Before you guys go home or do other stuff, let's take a photo